Okay, this time I would like to introduce some impending issues between the ROK and the United States. I repeatedly mentioned the existence of ROK-US Defense Treaty, and that has been the fundamental base for the South Korean stability and the prosperity since 1953. Let me introduce first some major issues in the alliance. First issue is the sharing the American defense burden. Since the declining of American capability, which is discussed by many scholars and politicians, and most of them agree that decline of American capability started from the end of Vietnam War. So now America has too much burden to be a world police and to be a hegemonic country which produce the public goods. So now America is insisting, requesting its allies to share its burden together. President Trump requested $5 billion from South Korea as a defense burden sharing. It was a 400% increase, but it didn't work out. Let me introduce some statistics of the defense burden which South Korea and other American allies are paying now. Defense burden sharing by allies. 3 American allies, South Korea, Japan, and Germany. Number of American forces in South Korea, 28,000. In Japan, about 52,000. In Germany, 35,000. Burden sharing. 2 years ago, South Korea paid about $944 million. Japan, $1.8 billion. Germany, only $450 million. It was if we look at the percentage of GDP, South Korea paid 0.068% of the GDP as a defense burden sharing. Japan, 0.074, and Germany, 0.016. So it is too little. That's why America is pushing American allies in Europe to increase their defense expenditure to the 1% of their GDP. But last year, South Korea paid $1.1 billion as a defense burden sharing to the United States. Second issue is the deployment of THAAD. THAAD is a terminal high altitude aerial defense. And this is a ABM, one of the ABMs. ABM means anti-ballistic missile. Let me introduce the THAAD system in details. How THAAD works. First, North Korea fires missiles loaded with nuclear warheads. And those missiles go up to the atmosphere. And this is a THAAD system. The radar system of THAAD detects the launch of the missiles and traces the trajectory. And it gives the information data to the interceptors, the launchers of the ABM. And it fires ABM and destroys the North Korean missiles up in the air between the range of 40 kilometers and 150 kilometers high. This is the basic concept of THAAD system. But problem is this. Since the THAAD system is installed by American soldier and it is operated by the American soldiers, even though it is located within the South Korean soil. China strongly opposed to the idea of putting that system in Korea. The reason is simple. Currently, the U.S. THAAD system in South Korea has the radar detection range is about 600 kilometers over here. But Chinese government said that American government can extend this radar system about to 1,000 kilometers easily. Then it can detect, because Beijing is here, it can detect the eastern coast of China. But it doesn't make a lot of sense because already the US had two THAAD systems in Japan here. And the American THAAD systems in Japan have about, the radar detection range is about 1,800 or 2,000 kilometers. Already, it can cover whole China. So America does not need THAAD system in reality. That's what the China is arguing. But problem is this, another problem is this too. Already, China has a THAAD system, two THAAD systems over here. One here and another one here. It's a Chinese THAAD system. It's got the radar detection range is about 2,000. It covers whole Japan. So China does not like the idea of the American THAAD system right in front of Beijing. And also China does not trust America because America might extend the radar detection range to 2,000 kilometers. Because of the deployment of US THAAD system in Korea, China put the economic sanctions against South Korea. And one of the Korean department stores have about 180 department stores in China, and out of which 100 has been shut down because of the unreasonable and unclarified reasons. For example, like it is quite fragile or vulnerable to fire or insanity or something like that. And third major issue is the expanding the areas for the joint military operation. America is asking the ROK to send ROK forces abroad for the US forces. When the US forces have fighting or war outside Korea, American government wants South Korean forces to come with the US forces and fight together. Both countries are discussing about this matter now. Another major problem is possessing nuclear weapons by South Korea. Since it is almost clear that North Korea is having between 50 to 70 nuclear warheads and also delivery systems. But South Korea does not have any nuclear weapons. But America does not like the idea of the proliferation of nuclear weapons to South Korea. Instead, America provides the nuclear umbrella. Nuclear umbrella. When North Korea fires nuclear weapons, America will unfold umbrella to protect South Korea. So the USA opposes to the idea of the South Korean possession of nuclear weapons. And lastly, but not the leastly, joining the Democracy Alliance in the recent years to contain China, in order to contain China. AUKUS, for example, Australia, UK, and the US, or Five Eyes. America is asking South Korea to join one of these anti-Chinese alliance. So South Korea is considering the possibility now. Let me introduce the 10 largest military spenders in the world. The US spends $649 billion a year. This is the more money than rest of the 9 countries' military budget combined. China, 250, Saudi Arabia, 67, India, 66, France, 63, Russia, 61, UK, 50, Germany, 49, Japan, 46, South Korea, 43. So South Korea is the 10th largest defense expenditure spender in the world. This is too much. South Korea spends 2.6% of GDP to defense. This is too much. This is too much. Because Japan spends only 0.9% to defense. So I think South Korea needs to reduce a little of defense spending, but because of the North Korean threat, it is really difficult. Now, secondary issues, along with the major issues. The first, development of long-range missiles. Until last year, the US never allowed South Korea to develop the missiles which can fly over 700 kilometers. But now, US permitted an unlimited driving range of the missiles. So this issue has been disappeared since last year. And transfer of the joint command to Korea. Currently, the command of Korean Army is shared by the United Nations. So both governments are discussing about the transfer of the joint command to Korea. And third issue is nuclear-powered submarines. Since it is known that North Korea has successfully developed nuclear-powered submarines. But it is known that Korea is capable of making nuclear-powered submarines. But the US says no. Another issue is the reprocessing the nuclear wastes. Because in Korea, there are 18 nuclear power plants. But ROK is not allowed to process the nuclear wastes. Nuclear waste. So what the ROK do now is to wrap the nuclear wastes up and store them in a deep inside a mountain. The last secondary issue is the joining US MD, Missile Defense System, MD. US asks strongly, but because of China, South Korea is hesitating now. The last issue I'd like to raise is the bandwagoning, the South Korean choice in the 21st century. In international relations, before I do that, what is bandwagoning? Bandwagoning is a long line of parade. When you see the Rio festivals or other parades, there's always a leader up here and leading the other people. And usually, this is a pam-pam girl. Pam-pam girl is leading the march, and the people with musical instruments are playing music and follow her. And some war veterans with full of their medals here, and follow them. And behind them, some people are following. This is a long march. It's a bandwagon. But in real world, the leader of the world now is the United States. And behind the United States, there are two countries. They are saying always yes to the United States. They are UK and Japan. Behind these people, these countries, there are some countries. They say no first time, but later they join the United States. France, Germany, and Italy. And rest of the countries are following these guys. And perhaps these days, China and Russia, they do not establish their own bandwagon, but they are following the US, but they are not joining the US leadership. South Korea was over here long time, about 7 years ago, but South Korea successfully accumulated its capability and power and money. So it went up to here. So South Korea is about here. This is your basic assumption and theory of bandwagoning. So obviously, bandwagoning is a strategy employed by states in a weaker position. So no matter you like American leadership or not, you stay in this parade, in this bandwagoning, and follow the American leadership. And in the meanwhile, you accumulate your capability. So certainly the anti-American sentiment, Americanism, is not a viable option for the 21st century Korea.